A very big hello to all you ladies and gentlemen in Australia. Um, I'm thrilled to be able to do this little video to you, and I hope that you enjoy the content. I have a huge affection for Australia because I'm not sure whether you know or not, but I went to Australia as a very young man. I was 17, just turning 18, 1967, 8, and I was fed up with England and fed up with my family and wanted to travel as far away as I could get. And at that time, Australia was as far away because they'd not quite landed on the moon at that point in time. Anyway, I went to Sydney and uh, I was there in Sydney for about 2.5 years. And I have to say that being British and being in Australia in the 60s, late 60s, when it was all about the Beatles and Carnaby Street and so on and so forth, it was an absolute joy. It was bliss. Because all the girls uh, wanted to get to know you because you were British and you had a different accent and so on and so forth. And I have to say that I thoroughly enjoyed my time as a young man, a lusty young man in Australia. Anyway, eventually I ended up moving up to Brisbane, which I enjoyed even better because it was like really, it wasn't like a city, it was more like a very large town. And it was while I was living in Brisbane, I learned to play flamenco guitar, which changed my life completely. From that moment in time, after studying really very hard and practicing over and over and over again, I actually got a job in a restaurant playing for about 14 months after I'd had my first lesson. An interesting thing I must tell you that happened. I used to have my lessons on a Saturday, of course, because I was working during the week. And anyway, I had this lesson this particular Saturday, and my teacher, a guy called Peter Williamson, he was married to Robin, and she was a flamenco dancer. And anyway, they were getting after I'd had my lesson, they were getting ready to go out to do a gig. And anyway, while I was waiting for them to get dressed, and I was going to leave with them, I started playing a little rhythm, and Peter comes running out of his bedroom and said, "What do you? Who taught you that?" Because he hadn't taught it to me. And I said, "Oh, I was watching you play it the other day." And he said, "Well, you're doing it wrong." And anyway, I was doing something very wrong, a little wrong, and he corrected me. Anyway, after a few minutes, he came back. He said, "Right," he said, "have you got a white shirt and black trousers?" I said, "Yeah, I think so." He said, "Well, go home and get changed." He said, "You're going to do your first gig today." I said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "We've got a gig today." He said, "You know," he said, "I work with Robin, she dances." He says, I play lead guitar. He said, "And I've got this Dutch guy, Jan, and he either plays guitar, second guitar, or he sings. He can't do both together. And if you play second guitar, that piece you were just playing, then we are a four piece. So you're doing your first gig today." So obviously I was very nervous, but what I didn't know was that first gig was television. It was New Faces. I'm sure you guys can remember way back, and New Faces was very popular. And the crazy thing was that we won it. In the Brisbane edition, we won it. And so 3 weeks later, we're flown down to Sydney. We're met with a nice big limo, driven to a five-star hotel, and went on the Sydney edition as winners in Queensland. And I thought to myself, I could get used to this. This was like a whole new lifestyle. It was quite incredible. Anyway, we didn't win in Sydney. We came second, but that just changed it. It just made me more determined to kind of make it my living. Anyway, cut a long story short, I came back to the UK and went to Spain to study. Um, I got married at that time to an English girl, and I wanted to take her to Australia, so we went back again to Australia. And the first job, in the meantime, I'd been working. I'd got a real job because my wife had told me to. Um, and my first job in Australia, when I went there in '73, I think it was, I actually was part of the team that launched Bank Card. I'm not sure if you guys remember Bank Card. It was Australia's first mass market credit card before Visa and uh, uh, what was the other one? MasterCard, sorry, mental block. Before Visa and MasterCard were in Australia, 11 banks got together. They formed a company called Charge Card Services Limited, and they borrowed staff from all the banks to launch BankCard, and they had 4 permanent staff, of which I was one, which was amazing for me because it meant I'm working for the banks. It means I got a 1% mortgage. I had a brand new Ford Falcon car with all the expenses. It was a dream job. And I was there about, 4 years or so. From there, I decided that I wanted to sell tangibles, not intangibles. So I got a job with a 3M company. Now, the interesting thing about that was that, sort of in an unknowing way, that's when I got into my first new technology kind of situation, because 3M company have 87,000 products, and they said to me, David, we have all of these products. Most of them are industrial products, but we believe that there may be some products that could be consumer products. Take a look at what we've got, and if you find something that you think we should make a consumer product, put a proposition together and we'll look at it. What I discovered was that they had a fantastic product in their industrial division that was called Nomad Matting. And how that came about, again, it's an interesting story. How that came about is that the mafia went to 3M in America, and they said, look, we keep opening these new nightclubs and these new casinos, and we spend a fortune. We put brand new carpeting down, and within a few days the carpets are in the right mess. So can you do something for us? So 3M did an evaluation of doormats, and it turned out that the first person walked onto a brand new doormat would wipe his feet and rub all of whatever is on the bottom of his shoes onto the mat, but it would sit on the top of the mat, and the next person coming along would pick that up and take it in. So what 3M decided to do, they invented this looped vinyl product, very high loops, so that when you walked on it, there was a big gap, and whatever came off your shoes went to the bottom underneath the vinyl, and it was called Nomad Matting. So I did a proposal that we should do. They only had it in very large sizes for these big clubs and things, but I did a proposal that we do a small size that we could sell for for consumer, as a consumer product for domestic houses, which is what we did, and that was very successful, and I got a managing director's award for that. And then what happened was that they, as you probably know, 3M were famous for their recording tapes, cassettes, and 3-inch master tapes for recording in studios. And they released a new product which was called Metafine. It was the world's first metal particle tape, and they asked me to do a launch for it. So I said, why don't we rebrand that whole range, because we had low ferric and high ferric and all of these different types of cassettes. So we rebranded them in the way that they looked and the whole sort of layout of them. And I did this booklet which is called Scotch Tape, The Truth Comes Out, which is, if you think about it, it's a pretty clever bit of wording. Anyway, that was so successful, and what I did is I teamed up with the hi-fi manufacturers like Toshiba and Sony and so on and so forth, and I said, why don't we do promotions? I've got what was then the software, the cassette, you've got the hardware. If we work with the retailer and we split the cost 3 ways, we can do all these promotions, which is exactly what we did. And that was so successful that actually Pioneer then headhunted me from 3M, and I was given the job as sales manager for Pioneer Electronics. So there am I with 3M, and I've just launched the world's first metal particle tape. While I was at Pioneer, we launched the Laserdisc product. Again, top technology, and it was really a coincidence that I happened to be involved with them. Anyway, we had our first child, and that was at that time that my wife was getting itchy. I want to go back to the UK, so on and so forth. So I had to give up the Pioneer job to move back to the UK. And what we did was we had 2 weeks holiday in Thailand, And then I put my wife and my son on the plane back to London, and I spent 7 weeks traveling the world looking to see what is going to be the next big thing in technology. And it was during that period of time that it became obvious to me that computing, and particularly home computing, was going to be big. So I got back to the UK in 1983, and in those days, of course, there's no internet, so the jobs that you could find were advertised in the newspapers. It was always Thursday newspapers and Sunday newspapers had all the jobs in. So I scoured all of these different jobs, anything with the word computing in it, even though I knew absolutely zero about computing. And anyway, I saw one job advertised, and if I remember rightly, it was computer services, but I don't really remember what it was about. Anyway, I got on the phone and I rang this recruitment agent in London, and it took me, I have to be honest, it took me about 40 minutes to persuade him to give me an interview. I didn't warrant an interview because I knew nothing about it. But anyway, I got an interview, so intrepid David gets on the train, goes up to London, and I remember it like it was yesterday. As I arrived at this building, there was a lady leaving, and I remember holding the door open for her as she left. It sounds inconsequential, but it meant a lot. So when I got greeted by this recruitment agent and sat down and had an interview, it was about 40 minutes, 45 minutes. At the end of the interview, this guy said, "Right, David," he said, "there's no doubt in my mind that you could do the job you've come for standing on your head, but I'm not going to put you forward for it." I said, "Oh, thanks a lot." He said, No, hear me out. He said, "You've got the best retail CV I've ever seen in 30 years in the business." He said, "And it would be remiss of me not to find you something that utilizes your skills." So I got up to leave. He said, sit down. He said, "Did you see a lady leaving?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, she's just given me a brief for a job. Because you came in straight after her, I've not even had the time to write it up yet." He said, "And I think that job would be absolutely perfect for you." And that was a job with Commodore. I mean, talk about serendipity. Incredible luck. So, anyway, 3 days later, I'm meeting with this lady, and I got offered the job. And the job was, I was specifically recruited to sell Commodore PETs into the retail market. So they'd gone to this recruitment agent and said, "Look, we need to sell these products into retail. We don't know, do we need a computer specialist who knows nothing about retail, or a retail specialist who knows nothing about computers?" And he said, "I recommended they get a retail specialist," he said, "and you're it. Your profile is perfect for this job." So I had this meeting with Eileen Stroud, her name was, and 3 days after that, I'm in front of the managing director. It was Howard Stamworth at the time. This is Commodore in Slough, and I got the job. Now, wonderful as that was, and trust me, I mean, I was thrilled to bits because, I'd found a job with the leading company in home computing just by complete fluke. But within a few weeks, I found out a lot about Commodore. The first thing I found out was that they never had a business plan, which, if you think about it, sounds incredible. This is this worldwide business with no business plan. How did I come to that decision? Well, I can tell you that after 7 or 8 weeks, I got a message from Commodore International saying, "We've decided to drop the PET product line. We're not going to make any more." So I'd been recruited to sell a product that was in a few weeks going to be made redundant. Now, that tells me they had no business plan. Why would they recruit me if that was going to happen? Now, I got very, very fortunate again because I was working for the business systems division, selling PETs, and we also had the consumer division, which was handling the VIC-20 and the very recently released Commodore 64. I joined in June of '83, and I think the 64 was released in October or November of '93. Sorry, 83, not 94, 84 I joined. And what happened was that the consumer division had a sales manager, and it also had a key accounts manager who looked after all of the big retailers. That key accounts manager, right at that moment in time, decided to leave. And so I was given that position. Now, the sales manager was Paul Welsh, and he hated me. The reason he hated me was because he didn't pick me. I was made to work in his division, and he resented that. The fact that I was absolutely the perfect person for the job was irrelevant. He didn't like me at all. Anyway, cut a very, very long story short, we moved away from Slough. We built a new purpose-built facility in Corby, in the Midland, basically in the Midlands, and we had assembly operations. We had warehousing and distribution and sales and marketing, and accounts and everything all under one roof. A fantastic location. Now, because we moved away from London, we were in Slough, which is just outside London. The managing director Howard Stamworth and the marketing director John Baxter, they did not want to move because their children were in schools and all settled and they got properties and everything. So we ended up having to recruit a new managing director. And we eventually got a guy who came in from IBM actually, and he was a absolutely terrific. Nick Bessie, his name was. He was a really, really sharp cookie. I really liked him a lot. But he didn't stay very long, simply because at that particular moment in time, which would have been 84, 85, yeah, 84, Commodore UK was also responsible for several other countries, New Zealand and Australia. And so Nick's responsibility was those territories as well. So he went off on a journey to Australia and New Zealand. And while he was in New Zealand, he met up with an IBM distributor who he was trying to sell Commodore into, and that guy offered him a partnership in this business. So Nick gave up Commodore and moved to New Zealand. Anyway, all of that is just kind of a background. What happened was it gave me the opportunity to start to introduce my marketing techniques. And I, for example, I'm the person who coined the phrase, "From now on, we don't sell computers, we sell dreams." And the reason I came up with that is because if you look at a computer, it doesn't matter what it is, a VIC or a 64 or an Amiga, all it is a piece of plastic with some keys on it. And that is extremely difficult to market. So I said what we should do is we should wrap it in a package, put some nice games in there. We must also put some productivity software in there, maybe a word program and the arts package, and obviously the latest possible game that we could put in there. You put in the word processing and stuff because you need to give the parent the justification for buying the product in the first place, because he says this is for my child's education. We all know it's all about the games, but hey, whatever the needs must. So with the Commodore 64, we introduced packs. We actually did 2 packs a year to keep it fresh. One of the first packs we did was the Light Fantastic pack, which had a light gun game in it. We then did we did one called the Connoisseur Collection, which we had a mouse in there. That was a Japanese product called Neos Mouse and Cheese. It was an art package that you used a mouse. Very, very clever. So two different 64 packs every year, and I know we kept the 64 going 2 years beyond its true sell-by date because we did these packs and they were very popular. Anyway, then we have the release of the Amiga. The Amiga 1000, of course, was an amazing product, but it was one of these products that was like, it was not powerful enough to be taken as a serious business product, which it should have been with the video animation and stuff like that. But it was too expensive to be a games machine, so it was kind of really in no man's land. Anyway, eventually, as you know, we got the Amiga 500 launched, and that came to us in I think it was 86 or 87, I think it was. Anyway, when we first got it, as soon as we put it on sale, it sold pretty well. But then we sat down and decided, what are we going to do? How are we going to make this into a pack that's going to be really popular? And so what happened is I sat down with my team of guys and we worked out, what do you think is going to be the next really big game? And everybody came to the conclusion that the next big game is going to be Batman the movie, because it was going to be released at the same time as the movie was released and so on and so forth. So I took a trip to Ocean Software, who I knew quite well, and I sat down with these guys and said, right, gentlemen, I said, I'm now going to give you a proposition that you're either going to have the balls to go for, or you're going to send for the men in the white coats to drag me away. So they said, what do you want to do? I said, right, I said, I want to put Batman the movie into a pack, and it's going to be a pack that features Batman. The fact that the Amiga is in there is incidental. This is a pack that's going to major on Batman. And I said, basically, I want you to give it to me for 2 months. As soon as it's ready. I said, when's it going to be ready? And they said, September. I said, okay. So I want in September, I want it for 2 months before you sell it to your dealers, exclusively in the package. And you can't get it anywhere else except in the bundle. I said, and the last thing is I want to pay you tuppence for it. I don't want to pay you very much money for it. So the first thing they said was send for the men in the white coats. Obviously, because it was a crazy idea. Anyway, they had a conversation amongst themselves, and they said, right, David, we've got a couple of concerns. They said, first of all, we think our dealers are going to be pretty angry. And I said, well, yeah, I said, I agree. I think that maybe for the first couple of days they will be. However, I think they'll soon get over it, because if they start selling a £400 product as opposed to a £40 product in volume, I know what I'd prefer to sell. Okay, they said, fair enough. They said, David, we've just spent $1 million just paying for the license to use the name. We've estimated it's going to cost us another $1 million to make the game. And based on that $2 million, we've worked out how many we need to sell as a minimum to get our money back, and we know what we'd like to sell, and we are afraid that this activity might affect those numbers. And I said, well, bear in mind, gentlemen, I've got a much, much bigger marketing budget than you, and I'm going to be marketing Batman with an Amiga inside it. So I said, I don't think you're going to have any problems there. I said, we will mirror exactly your advertising, so it all looks the same. So they said, okay. And then in the end, they agreed, which I thought they really had some balls to do that, because, 10,000 pieces was a lot, but not in relation to the amount of money that they're investing. Anyway, the net result was, when we launched it, yes, the dealers were upset, but exactly as I predicted, only for a couple of days, and then they started to sell the Batman pack. Ocean themselves, they sold 5 times their highest estimate of sales as a result of the activity that we did. And I didn't end up taking 10,000 pieces from them. I ended up taking 186,000 pieces, because that's how many Batman packs we sold in the 12 weeks to Christmas. It was a phenomenal success, much, much greater than any of us, including me, ever anticipated. But it proved the point. It proved that this was the way that one should market our products. Now, the crazy thing about that was that I went to Mediali and said, right, look at these results. Let's spread this across all of Europe. And we'll do it again with a different bundle, and we'll do the packaging design in different languages. We'll do one television commercial which will overdub in all the languages, and so on and so forth. Let's really kill this thing. And he would not do it. He absolutely refused to do it. What he did was he gave every single subsidiary, France, Spain, Germany, it didn't matter, he gave them all a percentage of their turnover, and they were allowed to spend it on marketing in any way they wanted. So there was no consistency whatsoever across anywhere. I mean, the US was the US might as well have been on the moon, because they were not involved in anything like that. So the point that I'm trying to make is that if you look at the fact that, first of all, we had no business plan. Secondly, we had nobody who had any really commercial acumen in terms of retail selling in the form of Mediali. And on top of that, to make matters even worse, they never had any external auditing. Now, what does that mean? Well, let me tell you this, okay? It means that they never actually knew if the sales that each subsidiary had recorded and told it they'd made were real. And let me give you a really, really good example. Commodore of the Netherlands was the general manager, actually was managing director, was a guy called Bernard van Tienen. He's passed away now, so I don't mind talking about him. At every quarterly meeting, managers meeting, that we attended in order to A, report what we'd done in the previous quarter, and B, get set targets for the following quarter, he used to brag to us that he had not met his target. So at the end of the quarter, he would invent invoices, put product on a truck, send it out of the building on the last day of the quarter on a 5-day journey, and then 5 days later bring it back into stock, into his company stock. So every quarter he did this, quarter after quarter after quarter. Now, what that means is that because Commodore didn't have any external auditing, they didn't know about this, so they did not know the sales that he had recorded, and they had assumed the money was in the bank was not a sale. No money in the bank. I mean, I'm sure you can understand this was a business destined to fall off the cliff. It had absolutely... In fact, I'm going to even add further to that, because after the Batman pack, I was promoted to sales and marketing director, which clearly I'd earned. However, there was a vacancy came up for a general manager of Commodore Electronics Limited, which was the holding company for the whole group, based in Basel in Switzerland, and it was there because if you were in that particular canton, which was called Aish, you paid zero tax. So Commodore had an office there, and that office controlled all of the countries where we did not have an operating subsidiary. And I was appointed as general manager of that, and I was there for 2 years, which for me was the most perfect job, because A, I love to travel, and B, I'm a hunter, and I like, here's something, go sell it and build a business, which is exactly what I did. Anyway, I mentioned that because I was promoted to that role in 1990. I was there all of 1990 and all of 1991, and I loved every second of it. It was fabulous. Anyway, at a general managers meeting in London, I think it was about the 4th of January, something like that. We had a general managers meeting, and I got up to leave, and then Mehdi Ali said, "Pleasance, come here, sit down." He said, "I'm going to give you your wish." And I said, "What wish is that, Mehdi? I've got lots of wishes, but what wish is that?" He said, "I want you to go to the States." He said, "You've been asking me for ages to take over the States because their business is static, they're not doing anything, and I know if anybody can sort of kick it in the bum, you can." He said, "Right," he said, "I want you on the 7 o'clock flight out of London today." This was about midday in Frankfurt. So he said, "Go upstairs and get them to book you on that flight. No excuses." So anyway, what he'd forgotten about, because he didn't even think about it, that 7 o'clock flight out of London was Concorde. So I got to fly Concorde once because of Mehdi Ali's error. So you got to be lucky sometimes, I guess. Anyway, the reason I'm mentioning that is because when I got to the US, to Westchester, I had 3 sales guys and I think 2 or 3 marketing people, and they were selling absolutely zero, nothing. So I said, "Why aren't you selling anything?" They said, "We're not allowed to." "What do you mean you're not allowed to?" They said, "Apparently all of our customers have not paid their bills, so we've been stopped from selling anything." I said, "Why haven't they paid their bills?" They said, "We don't know." And I thought, well, this is absolutely crazy. So I said, "Right, let's make some appointments. Let's get to the bottom of this." Anyway, it just happened that the very first appointment that was made happened to be with Sears in Chicago. And I can remember it like it was yesterday. There we are. I think we're up on the 12th floor of the Sears building in Chicago. And I'm there with Steve Salas, who was my rep for that area. And I'm sitting across a boardroom table with about 10 Sears people. And so anyway, I introduced myself. I said, "Look, I'm David Pleasance. I've been with Commodore for, I think it was about 9 years at that time, something like that." And I said, we're doing really, really good business in Europe, and obviously we're not doing so well over here in the US, and I'm here as your friend. I'd like to get to the bottom of what's going on. If there's something wrong, let's fix it and work together. So I said, "Would you mind telling me why you've not paid your bill?" And they said, well, Mr. Pleasance, we're just waiting for you to take all of our stock back. And I was taken aback by that, because I said, well, to be honest with you, I said, I've been with Commodore, I think, about 9 years. I've never known Commodore to be a lending library. At which point in time they pushed a piece of paper across the desk to me, and it was a letter signed by the president of Commodore Inc. That was a guy called Jim Dion, and it was a sale or return agreement. He had given them a sale or return contract which he had signed, which I'd never seen before. We never did that. We didn't need to do that. Anyway, I was completely shocked, and to be honest with you, I was stumped. I didn't know what to do or what to say. But then it dawned on me. I said, look, I said, what is the product you've got? Guess what the product was, ladies and gentlemen? It was CD TVs. Now, that is a product that even technical experts had difficulty in selling. It was way ahead of its time. It was very complex, and there is not a hope in hell that a Sears employee could possibly sell a CD TV. They're hard pushed to ring something up on the till and put it in a plastic bag. I mean, let's be honest about it. That was kind of the level of selling that you'd get in a Sears store. So I said, gentlemen, I've got to admit, you should never have been sold this product. It's a completely wrong profile for your store, with the greatest respect, and I apologise. I said, I'll have to honour that because Jim Dion has signed it. I will honour it, and I will take the stock back. I said, however, the truth of the matter is, I said that you should be selling Amiga 500s. That is a profile product that your store could absolutely sell. We're selling bucket loads of it in Europe, and that's what you should be selling. I said, gentlemen, listen, I don't really want to start my career in the US with a great big negative on my books. I said, would you guys mind? I said, if I take your stock back, which I will do, would you give me an order for Amiga 500s to the same value as the stock I'm taking back? And if you do that, I will give you your own pack, your own Amiga 500 Sears pack exclusive, which they went for. So it enabled me. We took all the stock back, and it enabled me to get 500s into them, for which they started selling. Now, this had happened to every major retailer in the US. Now, the point I'm trying to make is that Mediali and nobody knew that these were not real sales. Jim Dion had recorded them as sales. He'd put them on his sales report. He'd claimed his bonus and his commission on the basis of those sales, but they weren't paid for. They were never sales. So can you now see how Commodore was run as a basically, if we had employed serious professional saboteurs, they could not have done a better job than Commodore did to itself. Anyway, the bottom line with that was that I took all the stock back. I think in total it was something like $760,000 worth of stock from all the different retailers. And I got Amiga 500s into all of them. But anyway, so the point that I'm trying to make with you is that if you consider no business plan, nobody running the ship who knew in which direction to travel, and no financial external auditing, it was a recipe for disaster. However, we move on. During my time with Commodore, I was responsible for the launch of the 500 in the UK. We did that there was a rooftop garden in Kensington in central London, and we used a television personality called Jonathan Ross, and so we launched the Amiga 500 up there. We then, the Amiga 1200 I didn't actually launch because I'd just gone, as you know, I was in America when the 1200 came out, which is in 1992, and as an adjunct to my story in America, I then went to Mediali, and I said, I'd been there 11 months, and I said, Medi, my job here is done for now. She said, what are you talking about? I said, look, I've just got us trading again, and I said, I've sold into all of the retailers, I've sold them in 500s and other things as well. I said, no, I do not want to sell them anymore. He said, what are you talking about? I said, look, Medi, you and I both know we've got the Amiga 1200 coming out fairly shortly. So I know if I stay here and I keep selling 500s, as soon as the 1200 comes out, what are they going to do? They're going to say, David, will you take all our 500s back and while we take in 1200s? I said, I'm not going to allow that to happen. I said, if I leave now, I'll go somewhere else to work for you. If they want any more 500s, they will order them themselves, and they will have no excuse to ask me to take them back, because I will not have sold them to them, which was me looking forward to what was going to happen around the corner. Anyway, that's what happened. So I went back to the international business I was doing for a couple of months. And so that's why I was not in the UK for the launch of the 1200. Anyway, I was actually an interesting story. I was in Athens in Greece, and I'd got the mother of hangovers. I'd been out the night before and just appointed a brand new distributor for Greece, and we'd been drinking ouzo all night. And I was rung phone call from Mehdi Ali at about 5 in the morning in Athens, and my head's throbbing. He said, Pleasance, I want you in London today. No excuses. Get there as fast as you can. So I had to fly over to London with this mother of headaches. Anyway, that was when Mehdi Ali turned up, and he said, right, he said, you are now Managing Director of Commodore UK. No excuses, because I'd actually turned it down once before. He said, no excuses. He said, I know you built this business. I know this is the strongest business we've got in the company. He said, we're in deep financial trouble, and I need you to do what you can do to generate funds for us. So I said, okay. I said, I'm a sales and marketer. I'm not a financial guy. Yes, I can read a spreadsheet, of course, but I'm not a financial guy. And I said, if you want me to make sales, you need somebody else to handle the money. So I said, we had a guy called Colin Proudfoot who was I'm not sure if he was a financial director or just a financial officer. I'm not sure. He'd not been there very long, and I didn't know him because I was in America. Anyway, I said, make him join MD with me so that we can share between us the responsibility and share the achievements between us, which is what happened. As it turned out, Colin, who I didn't know before, and we really, really hit it off well. We were a perfect match. And he was a genius, an absolute genius. And so we raised a lot of money, but it wasn't enough. Commodore was so far under at the time that no way that we could survive. So, but as those of you who don't know, because Commodore UK was the strongest business, and because Commodore UK was its own entity, we were Commodore Business Machines UK Limited, which meant that we were not part of the bankruptcy. And because we were strong, as each of the other subsidiaries who were part of the bankruptcy, as they went under, we bought all their stock and kept trading. And we actually lasted about 14 months longer than anybody else, which I'm pretty proud of that. During that period of time, and one of the most fatal things during that period of time was that we just launched the 1200, and we got orders for Christmas coming out of the yin yang. We'd really got them sold in well to all the retailers, all booked in month by month by month. And then Mehdi comes to me and he says, I want to launch the CD32 and I want to launch it now. And I said, Mehdi, you're crazy. I want to do it now. I want the extra sales. I said, Mehdi, two things. First of all, you are not going to get extra sales. You won't get extra sales because all you'll do is to kill the 1200. And I said, the second thing is I've got development kits in all of the major software houses in the UK. They're all developing kits specifically for the CD32. And they are writing games and things which will utilise the technical advances. I said, and they're not ready. Anyway, he would not listen to me no matter what I said to him. He refused to listen because we'd planned to launch the CD32 in the late spring, early summer of the following year. But he absolutely insisted that we launched it, which I was totally and utterly against. But anyway, we took on the role. Given no option, I had to do it. So Dawn Levac, who was my marketing manager, very, very brilliant lady, she booked us in, got us into the Science Museum in central London to launch the CD32 from, which was a brilliant venue. And anyway, a couple of things that happened, which I think are really, really interesting. One is that about 3 weeks before we were due to launch, there was an interview in the PC magazine where they interviewed Tom Kalinske, who was the worldwide president of Sega. And the interviewer said to him, okay, what about CD-based 32-bit consoles? And he said, can't be done. He said, if anybody could do it, it would be Sega. It can't be done. And that was in print. So I said, thank you, God, because that gave us something then that we could work on. So for our launch, we had a big, beautiful voiceover. It was Tom Kalinske announcing that couldn't be done and so on and so forth. And then, of course, we launched the product with, the smoke and mirrors stuff that you do. And there the product was, and ladies and gentlemen, it's going to be in your shops in the next 3 weeks, which is a phenomenal way to launch. Now, another thing that happened, so again, talk about serendipity. In that period, just before we did the launch, I got a phone call from a guy, and he said, David, you won't remember me. He said, I'm sure. He said, but we've done business before. He said, we have poster sites all over the country. He said, and you know how we work because you've used us before. He said, when you book a site, you pay 50% up front, and then when you commence your advertising program, you pay the other 50%. He said, I've got three biggest size poster sites in central London that the guy has paid 50% on, and now he doesn't want to go ahead, and I'm offering them to you for half price because I've got half the money already. Oh, and by the way, one of them is right outside Sega's head office. Well, sorry, but that was just too good to be true. So I'm pretty certain it was our marketing agency. I'm not sure it was the marketing people or the PR people. But anyway, I don't know. In the UK, they had television adverts from Sega were very clever. They were, to be this good takes ages. And then they spun the word ages around. To be this good takes Sega, because ages spelled backwards is Sega. So we put this great big 96-sheet poster site right outside Sega's head office, which said, to be this good will take Sega ages. Because that is what their president said, which even though we did not have any internet then, that went viral. And I've got to say it was one of the joys of my life with Commodore was doing that. And yet, what people don't realise is that at that time, of course, it was a cottage industry. And like Nick Alexander was the general manager or managing director of Sega UK, and like we'd be competitors in the daytime, but we'd have a beer in the bar at night time. It was that kind of business. It was fantastic. So just a few days after that poster site had gone up, we would, at our industry dinner, we used to hold a dinner every year in the Gloucester Hotel, and everybody in the industry would be there, and we'd raise money for charity. That was like our awards night, if you like. So I'd got a few tables there, and so had Nick Alexander, and he wanders over to my table and he said, a bit close to home, Mr. Pleasance, a bit close to home. And I just said, well, Nick, where needs must. And never another word was ever said, but he was seething. He was so angry. It was so funny. I really enjoyed that part of it. Anyway, so that kind of brings you all up to date with my career in Commodore. I had 12 and a half years altogether. And I have to say, even though I worked for cretins most of the time, I loved every single second of that work. I could not wait to get to work every day. It was a joy. It was kind of an adrenaline rush, I guess, if you like. So obviously I was very, very upset when it went under. Now, at that time, Colin and I decided that as we were the most successful subsidiary and we knew what we were doing, we were very, very much in command of our own destiny, we decided we'd try to do a manage and buyout. So we recruited Coopers & Lybrand, one of the biggest accountancy firms in the world. I think they work with Deloitte now. I think they joined Deloitte. Anyway, we recruited those people. They were specialists in management buyouts. And so we spent months working on it. And we devised a business plan. Through these guys, we raised $50 million, which I can tell you in 94.5 was a lot of money. And that $50 million was made up of two very high wealth individuals, one guy who represented, I think, 3 high wealth individuals, and between them they were bringing in $25 million. And the other half, the other $25 million, was coming from a Chinese manufacturing company who were called New Star Electronics, who right up until that time had been ripping off Sega and Nintendo products and selling them into China, and obviously not paying any royalties at all. And they'd been told by the Chinese government they've got to get legitimate. So from our point of view, having a Chinese manufacturing company manufacturing our own products, who were part of our investment party, was like the most perfect solution for Commodore and its future. But what happened is that 48 hours before the auction, certain Mr. Petro Tichenko, who at that time was working for Eskom, stole them away from us. He said, "Don't pay 25 million, we'll give it to you for 5 million or whatever." It was a complete and utter lie because they didn't follow up with any of it. But anyway, he stole them away from us, which meant we were not in a position to bid. And now that might sound a bit difficult because people say, well, hang on, you still had 25 million and it sold for 15 million. Why didn't you bid for it? Well, the truth of the matter is we knew that we would not get finance. We'd not get credit terms from any of the suppliers. They'd all just been burnt very badly by Commodore, who went under. So there's no way that they were going to give us trading terms. We knew we would have to pay for componentry up front. And we worked out, and as I said before, Colin Proudfoot was an absolute genius. We worked out it would take us 7 months, 2 weeks and 4 days, in which time we would be in a financial position where we then could justify credit terms. So we knew we needed all of the $50 million to survive. Otherwise, we'd have bought the business. Let's say we paid 16 million for it, and within 3 or 4 or 5 months, we'd have been bankrupt ourselves because we couldn't pay for the componentry. So I just wanted to explain that so you understand the decision we made was very difficult, but it was necessary. Anyway, I just want to fill you in on Petro Tichenko. The reason why Petro used to work for Commodore. He was a logistics guy. He was responsible for making sure that whatever products we all, each of as general managers or managing directors of each company, had forecast for the quarter. For example, if I wanted 10,000 Amigas, he had to make sure I had 10,000 Amigas in my warehouse at the time that I reported sales for them. And he wasn't very good at that, I have to be honest with you. He made some immense... in fact, he made one immense mistake, which involved Australia. At the time when I did the Batman pack and we sold 186,500s, clearly I had underestimated the sales, and I always ordered a certain percentage of peripherals to go along with it, like hard drives and monitors, and I'd under-forecast monitors by a very big margin. So I said to him, I need some monitors. So what does he do? He scours the world, I should say, and he found some monitors in Australia, your country. So what does he do? He flies them back to the UK from Australia at an immense cost. You can imagine each one of those on a plane, instead of sending them by express shipping, which he could have done. Anyway, not only did he make that mistake and spend a fortune, when they got to us, of course, they're not compatible. Yes, they are 240 volts, but they're not compatible because their polarity is wrong. As you know, polarity is completely opposite to your side of the world. So that gives you an example of his incompetence. Anyway, what happened, the reason why he was offered a job with Eskom is because Manfred Schmidt, who was the managing director of Eskom, he used to have these shops that sold mostly musical stuff because he was in the music sort of business. And he started selling the 64s at a time when everybody wanted the 64. So he got on to Petro, and Petro said, I'll make sure you've got plenty. So Petro always made sure he had stock. So after Commodore went bankrupt, he went to Petro and said, I'll give you a job with Eskom. That's the reason why I hate Petro Tichenko with a vengeance. I believe it's justified, but that's, you make up your own mind. Anyway, that's sort of brought you guys right up to date with up to the time of the auction and so on and so forth. The last bit of good news I've got for you is that I am now part of a team. I'm not going to say consortium because it's not quite right. I am part of a team. We are actually buying Commodore back. We We have a lot of people involved. A lot of ex-Commodore people are involved in various ways and means. We have, for example, Dave Haney. We have Bill Hurd. We have who else? A whole load of people, all ex-Commodore engineers who have agreed to work with us. A list is too big to mention, to be honest with you. But believe you me, every single person who is involved in this buyout of the Commodore name, they're all passionate people, and they're all people with knowledge, and we're going to make it a success. Obviously, ladies and gentlemen, we need your support. Whatever you do, please support us in this. We have some new products coming out. There is just after this presentation, there will be a third video. There's already 2 videos online about buying Commodore. The third video, which will be released, I think it's on the 18th of July or thereabouts, will tell you about lots of new products that we've got coming. It's very, very exciting, and all I can tell you is that Commodore will once again be back in good hands. I'm thrilled to be a part of it. I wouldn't have it any other way. So, please, as I said, please support it, and thank you so much for your attention. If you've got any questions, please just send them to me. My email address for you is davidamigaman@gmail.com. davidamigaman@gmail.com. Send me any questions that you have that you'd like to answer, and so on and so forth. I'm glad to hear from you. I wish I could have been there because, as you know, I love Australia, and I'm sure I'll make it there sometime, hopefully very soon, and catch up with you. Thank you very much, guys. God bless.